Night falls over ancient Japan. The mountains fade into shadow. The forests whisper with wind and unseen movement. In the stillness, a question echoes across centuries. Who or what created this world? Long before emperors ruled, before temples rose from mist-covered valleys, the people of Japan believed their land was alive. Not just with animals or spirits, but with gods. Countless gods. They called them kami, divine beings hidden in rivers, mountains, storms, trees, and even the silence of empty places. But where did the kami come from? Japanese myth begins not with gods or heroes, but with chaos. A silent, shapeless void before the sky and earth separated. From that darkness, the first divine beings emerged. Mysterious, formless entities whose names survive only in ancient chronicles. Their story would eventually shape the identity of an entire nation. And at the center of it all stood a sacred belief. Japan itself was not simply land. It was divine creation. The origins of Japanese mythology are preserved in two remarkable texts compiled more than 1,300 years ago. The Kojiki, written in 712 CE, and the Nihon Shoki, completed in 720 CE. These chronicles were ordered by the imperial court to record the sacred history of the Japanese people. But they are more than history. They are myth, religion, politics, and identity woven together. The Kojiki, meaning records of ancient matters, is the oldest surviving book in Japan. According to court records, it was compiled by the scholar Ono Yasumaro, who wrote down stories recited from memory by a court storyteller named Hidenoar. These stories reached far back into oral tradition, into a time before writing, when myths were carried through generations by priests, shamans, and village elders. The Nihon Shoki, written 8 years later, presents many of the same myths, but with more structure and political purpose. It connects Japan's ruling imperial family directly to the gods themselves. Together, these texts preserve the earliest surviving picture of Japanese cosmology. But their story begins in a place beyond time. In the beginning, there was nothing. Ancient Japanese myth describes the earliest universe as a swirling, formless mass, like oil floating upon water. There was no sky above and no earth below. No mountains, no oceans, no light. Just chaos. Slowly, from this primal mixture, the lighter elements rose upward. They formed the heavens. The heavier matter sank downward, becoming the first hint of earth. From this division emerged the first divine beings, three mysterious gods known collectively as the Kotoeme Tsukumi, or separate heavenly deities. They were Amenemene Kinushi, Takamamasubi, and Kamamasubi. Unlike later gods in Japanese myth, these deities did not act. They did not speak. They did not shape the world. Instead, they simply appeared and then vanished. Their role was symbolic. They represented the birth of cosmic order from chaos. More gods followed. 5 more heavenly deities who also remained hidden from the world. Only later would the myth shift toward figures who shaped creation directly. At last, the gods of heaven chose 2 younger deities for a monumental task. Their names were Izanagi and Izanami, brother and sister, husband and wife, creators of the world. The heavenly gods summoned them to the floating bridge of heaven, a celestial platform suspended above the chaotic ocean below. From this vantage point, Izanagi and Izanami gazed down at the shapeless waters beneath them. The world had not yet been formed. The gods handed them a sacred weapon, the Aim no Naboko, the jeweled spear of heaven. With it, they were commanded to create land. Standing upon the bridge, Izanagi lowered the spear into the swirling ocean below. He stirred the water slowly. When he lifted the spear again, drops of salty water fell from its tip. Those drops hardened as they fell. They became the first island. This island was called Onigoroshima. According to the Kojiki, Izanagi and Izanami descended to this newly formed land and built a great pillar at its center. Around it, they constructed their first palace. Then, they performed a sacred marriage ritual. Walking in opposite directions around the pillar, they met again on the far side. But something went wrong. When they spoke their wedding vows, Izanami, the female deity, spoke first. In ancient Japanese belief, this was considered improper. Soon after their union, Izanami gave birth to a child, but the child was malformed. It was born without bones, like a jellyfish. The gods rejected the infant and set it adrift upon the sea. Disturbed, Izanagi and Izanami consulted the heavenly gods once again. The divine verdict was clear. The ritual had been performed incorrectly. They must repeat it. This time, Izanagi spoke first. The difference changed everything. Now their union produced healthy offspring. These divine children were not ordinary gods. They were islands. One by one, Izanami gave birth to the islands that would become the Japanese archipelago: Awaji, Shikoku, Kyushu, and finally, the great island of Honshu. Together, they formed Oyashima, the 8 great islands of Japan. In this mythic vision, Japan itself was born from divine creation. But Izanami's task was not finished. After the islands came the kami, the countless spirits that govern nature. Gods of wind, gods of rivers, gods of mountains, gods of trees and stones. Each new birth filled the world with life and power. But then came a birth that would bring tragedy. Izanami gave birth to Kagutsuchi, the god of fire. The act of giving birth to fire was catastrophic. The flames burned her terribly. Despite the efforts of the gods, Izanami died from her injuries. Her death shattered the harmony of creation. Izanagi, consumed with grief and rage, struck down the newborn fire god with his sword. From Kagutsuchi's blood and broken body, new deities emerged, gods of volcanoes, metal, and war. But Izanagi could not accept Izanami's death. Desperate, he made a decision that few gods dared attempt. He would descend into the land of the dead. In Japanese mythology, the underworld is called Yomi. Unlike the fiery hells of later religions, Yomi is a dark, decaying realm of shadow and silence. The Kojiki describes it as a place where the dead exist in a state of rot and stagnation. Izanagi traveled there to bring his wife back. When he arrived, he found Izanami waiting in darkness. Her voice echoed from the shadows. She told him she had already eaten the food of Yomi. Because of this, she could not easily return to the world of the living. But she promised to ask the rulers of the underworld for permission. She made one request. Izanagi must not look at her. But time passed in darkness. Impatient and frightened, Izanagi broke his promise. He lit a torch. The light revealed a horrifying sight. Izanami's body had decayed. Maggots crawled through her flesh. Thunder gods lived within her rotting corpse. Terrified, Izanagi fled the underworld. Enraged by his betrayal, Izanami pursued him. She sent demons and spirits of the dead to chase him across the dark plains of Yomi. At the entrance to the underworld, Izanagi sealed the passage with a massive boulder. Standing on opposite sides of the barrier, husband and wife spoke one final time. Izanami, furious and humiliated, swore vengeance. "Every day," she declared, "I will take the lives of 1,000 people." Izanagi responded with defiance. "Then every day, I will create 1,500. This exchange, according to Japanese myth, explains the cycle of death and birth in the human world. With the entrance to Yomi sealed, Izanagi returned to the land of the living. But he had been contaminated by death. He needed purification. At a river mouth, Izanagi performed a ritual cleansing known as misogi. This act of washing would become one of the most important purification rituals in Shinto tradition. As he washed his body, new gods were born from the droplets of water. When he washed his left eye, a radiant goddess appeared. Her name was Amaterasu. She was the goddess of the sun. From his right eye came Tsukuyami, the god of the moon. And from his nose came Susanoo, the wild and unpredictable god of storms and seas. These 3 divine siblings would become the most powerful figures in Japanese mythology. Among them, Amaterasu would shape the destiny of the Japanese nation itself. Izanagi placed Amaterasu in charge of the heavens. Her radiant light illuminated the world. Tsukuyomi ruled the night sky, but Susanoo proved difficult. He was violent, emotional, and destructive. According to the Kojiki, Susanoo wept constantly for his mother Izanami. His grief turned into rage. He destroyed crops. He caused floods. He terrified the gods of heaven. Eventually, his behavior became unbearable. Izanagi banished him from the heavenly realm. Before leaving, Susanoo insisted on seeing his sister Amaterasu one final time. But their meeting quickly escalated into rivalry. Each accused the other of dishonesty. To prove their sincerity, they performed a strange divine contest. They would create gods from each other's sacred objects. Susanoo chewed Amaterasu's jeweled necklace and spat out new deities. Amaterasu broke Susanoo's sword and formed gods from its fragments. Each claimed victory, but Susanoo's behavior soon spiraled into chaos again. In a drunken rage, he destroyed rice fields and sacred buildings. Then he committed an unforgivable act. He flayed a heavenly horse and threw its body into Amaterasu's weaving hall. One of her attendants died from the shock. Horrified and furious, Amaterasu withdrew from the world. She hid inside a sacred cave known as Amano. Without the sun goddess, darkness fell across the heavens and the earth. Crops failed. Demons roamed freely. The world descended into chaos. The gods gathered outside the cave to devise a plan. Finally, the goddess Amnoizum performed a strange and outrageous dance. Standing on overturned tub, she began to laugh, stomp, and strip away her clothing. The assembled gods erupted in laughter. Inside the cave, Amaterasu grew curious. Why were the gods celebrating while the world was in darkness? She opened the cave slightly. At that moment, the god Tajikareo pulled the cave door aside. Another god held up a sacred mirror. For the first time, Amaterasu saw her own radiant reflection. Mesmerized by her own brilliance, she stepped out. The gods quickly sealed the cave behind her. Light returned to the world. Susanoo, however, was punished severely. The gods cut off his beard and fingernails, symbols of divine status. Then they expelled him from heaven. He descended to the earthly realm of Izumo. There, Susanoo encountered a grieving family. A monstrous serpent called Yamata no Orochi had devoured 7 of their daughters. The 8th girl would be next. Susanoo promised to defeat the creature, but he demanded the girl's hand in marriage as his reward. The family agreed. Using a clever plan, Susanoo prepared 8 vats of strong sake. When a massive serpent arrived, each of its 8 heads drank deeply. Soon a monster fell asleep. Susanoo seized his sword and cut the creature into pieces. Inside the serpent's tail, he discovered a magnificent blade. This sword became known as Kusanagi, one of the most sacred treasures in Japan. Later, Susanoo presented it to Amaterasu as a gesture of reconciliation. Kusanagi would eventually become part of the imperial regalia of Japan, along with the sacred mirror and jewel used to lure Amaterasu from the cave. These objects symbolize divine authority, and through Amaterasu, that authority would pass to the Japanese imperial line. According to myth, Amaterasu sent her grandson Ninigi no Mikoto from heaven to rule the earth. She entrusted him with the 3 sacred treasures. Ninigi descended from heaven to the island of Kyushu. This event, known as the Tensun Korin, represents the divine origin of Japan's imperial family. Several generations later, Ninigi's descendant Jimmu would become the first emperor of Japan. Traditional chronicles date his reign to 660 BCE. Whether Jimmu existed as a historical figure remains uncertain, but his story reflects a powerful belief. The Japanese emperor was not merely a ruler. He was the descendant of the sun goddess herself. Yet Japanese mythology is not only about gods and emperors. It is also filled with countless smaller spirits, creatures that live quietly alongside humans. These include yokai, supernatural beings that inhabit forests, rivers, and abandoned places. Some are playful, some are dangerous, and some are simply strange. There are fox spirits called kitsune, known for their intelligence and shape-shifting powers. There are mischievous tanuki, raccoon dog spirits associated with trickery and humor. And there are terrifying entities that haunt lonely roads and forgotten temples. These creatures reflect a deeper aspect of Japanese belief. The world is alive with unseen presence. Mountains have spirits. Rivers have spirits. Even ancient trees can become sacred. In the Shinto worldview, the boundary between human and divine is thin. Every shrine, every ritual, every festival celebrates this connection. Even today, Shinto shrines across Japan honor the kami. People offer prayers, rice, sake, and purification rituals. The myths recorded in the Kojiki and Neon Shoki are still remembered in festivals and ceremonies. They are not just stories of the past. They are part of a living tradition. Japanese mythology reveals a universe filled with balance between life and death, order and chaos, light and darkness. The kami are not distant rulers of heaven. They are neighbors. They exist in waterfalls, mountains, and quiet forests. Perhaps that is why these myths have endured for centuries. They do not describe a distant divine world. They describe a sacred version of the world we already live in. And somewhere in the shadows of ancient shrines and mist-covered mountains, the kami may still be watching.